may be ignoring this all our lives, but let's pluck up the courage to face it. Small talk can be quite a drag, and we do everything we can to avoid it. The anxiety we associate with it is unimaginable. Is turning these boring talks into fruitful conversations possible? For Joe Rogan, that's quite a walk in the park. If there's anyone who knows how to avoid awkward small talk, it's him, hands down. Yes, he's unfazed, and we can't help but imagine how easy life would be for him. Rogan simply sits back, invites the most influential people in the world, and breezes through his DMT conversations for as long as half a day. Let's be honest, talking to someone influential, or maybe just people in general, without being awkward is a dream. People benefit from deep and meaningful conversations that help us forge connections with one another. Still, we often stick to small talk with strangers because we underestimate how much others are interested in our lives and wrongly believe that deeper conversations will be more awkward and less enjoyable than they actually are. But if we ask ourselves if we're ready to maintain an interesting conversation with someone, the answer is a straight up no. We don't blame you for it. Avoiding small talk with anyone without being terribly awkward is no easy feat. In this video, we'll discuss the popular psychology techniques from the one and only Joe Rogan. That will get us the knack for how to let small talk flow smoothly. Obviously, it seems far out of the scope, but don't fret, you can do it. Let's dive right in to see what tips Joe Rogan has for us. Tip number 1, begin with a heartwarming compliment. How about you start the conversation with an upbeat, lighthearted, and open vibe? Now that you've thought of it, I'm sure you wouldn't have it any other way. The spark between you and the listener will take a little while to develop here. Yep, that saves you from the monotonous, dreary tone which never ignited the spark in the first place. You might not have thought of it, but starting off with a compliment will help establish a vibe. The vibe that you wish people would match. While it seems like a pretentious word, people do pick up on good and bad vibes. So imagine jumping into a conversation with a wholesome compliment that instantly lightens up everything and eases the tension you'd feel otherwise. Imagine being told you look beautiful. I'm sure that would brighten your day. That's precisely what a heartfelt compliment does to your small talk. It helps your chit-chat flourish into hours of wholesome conversation. Speaking of Joe Rogan, it's safe to say he's the smartest out there when it comes to paying compliments. When he meets the guests on his show, who are there for their books, plays, movies, etc., he doesn't let a chance slip to compliment their work. And this isn't even all of it about him. He knows what it takes to boost the energy of his guests massively. Besides their work, he praises people for who they are. Imagine getting compliments on your personality. Exactly, that's awesome. But here's another thing we learned from Rogan. Don't wait for reactions when you compliment. True, that's where things begin to get awkward. But if you quickly move on with it, it'll do the magic for you. Tip number 2, find out the topics you'd mutually be interested in. We all know how fascinated Joe Rogan is with psychedelics, especially DMT. That's no tough nut to crack. But do you understand why Rogan brings the subject up in every episode? Okay, let me help you clear it up. He does that to dig into areas of mutual interest. So let's get one thing straight. He constantly brings it up in case the other person has a similar interest. Because obviously it's something he enjoys and can talk about in detail for hours and hours. Joe Rogan teaches us this technique for the better, and we can all use it in one way or another. Here's what we can do. Bring up a topic we're passionate about if we can talk about it for hours. Let's say a sport or a particular school of thinking. Or we can have memorable discussions if the other person is genuinely interested in what we say. Of course, that's an odd chance, but it's possible if we test the waters beforehand to find out what intrigues him. Also, you should remember that you're not the only one in this conversation. This mindset will help us be mindful of the other person and turn out conversations into fruitful, meaningful ones. That said, make sure you're not forcing conversations with anyone. If you feel like the other person doesn't care enough to keep it going, it's best to move on. Tip number 3, start your conversations off right with some exciting questions or food for thoughts. Now that calls for some mental stimulation. We all have those typical monotonous old ways of going about our conversations, and the dry talk should not come as a surprise if we continue to do it this way. That isn't wrong, but why follow the old ways when there's something that can hook the other person up? The key here is to scratch the surface of a person's character, and one thing's obvious, this will not happen with the old boring questions. So, just like Rogan, an inquiry like why dives deeper into people's personalities. For example, don't ask someone where he lives. Instead, ask him why he chooses to live there. Remember, the key word is why, and not where, what, and who. Using the word why frequently results in a more profound response that reveals the person's moral convictions, interests, or insights into their nature. When you ask them why, that gives them a significant say in the conversation and a chance for you to know them quite well. It leads naturally to discovering their passion and engaging them in discussions around it. But there needs to be more. One downside of small talk is that some people lead dull lives in their crudest forms. So ask them fantasy questions that'll broaden their horizons. A huge thanks to Rogan for this pro tip. Remember his questions like, let's say you become the president. Yep, that's peeling off the layers, which helps turn the conversation into a fun chat. Tip number 4, lateral thinking is the way out. Only engage yourself in conversations for a short time. Well, lateral thinking can save your life. What I mean by lateral thinking here is to use a strategy for problem solving that forms novel and unexpected connections between ideas. There's no denying that coming up with stuff to talk about with strangers is no child's play. The struggle is real. In a situation like this, you can't get away with chatting about the weather or where the person lives. In all honesty, that won't lead to a meaningful conversation with anyone. So you must occasionally think outside the box to keep things moving forward. Think about connections that are both unusual and surprising. That's just what we need to do. And it's also why Joe Rogan is so good at introducing new ideas. He's the GOAT when it comes to transitioning to new topics. Remember when he went on from complimenting a beard to speaking about the well-known wrestlers in the world? Exactly, he's super talented. Tip number 5, failure to listen is a failure to create a connection. We might not realize it, but failing to truly listen ruins it all. Let's say you're telling someone about your life. They appear uninterested and frequently interrupt you. Yes, you will probably try to finish the conversation so that you can move on. This is when you know how essential active listening is. It establishes a relationship with someone and makes them feel like they're being heard. And that's what makes healthy conversations going. Joe Rogan also teaches us the concept of mirroring, unintentionally imitating another person's gesture, speaking pattern, or attitude. During the conversation, make sure you repeat their words a bit, which will make them feel over the moon. You probably have yet to notice, but Rogan frequently does this when speaking to intellectuals. This tells them you're actively involved and not just lost in a sea of words. So if you wish to avoid this awkward small talk trauma with anyone, these tips from Joe Rogan will get you through it. What's your best tip to avoid awkward small talk? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to not miss out on more psychology tips. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.